Admiral Zortok stared at the holographic display with 4 of his 6 eyes, while his secondary pair remained fixed on the nervous lieutenant who had brought him the news. The alien vessel had appeared at the edge of Confederation Space 3 hours ago, moving at a steady pace directly toward their primary defense station. "You are certain there is only one?" Zortok asked, his scaled skin shifting from blue to a troubled purple. "Yes, Admiral. Our long-range scanners confirm it is a single vessel. No support craft, no escort ships, just one." Zortok's mouth tentacles twitched in confusion. His species, the Valkyrie, were the military leaders of the Arlaxian Confederation. For good reason, they understood the fundamental principles of space warfare. You never sent a single ship into unknown territory. Never. "What species?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. The configuration doesn't match any in our database." Zortok straightened his 8-foot frame. "Deploy Intercept Squadron Delta. Full defensive. Posture. But no weapons charged unless I give the command. And get the council informed. They'll want to observe this." The lieutenant hurried away while Zortok continued to study the approaching vessel. It was relatively small by Confederation standards, sleek with odd protrusions he assumed were weapon systems. The energy signature was unusual, powerful, but controlled in a way he hadn't seen before. 73 minutes later, Zortok stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching as the Delta Squadron surrounded the alien vessel at a cautious distance. The mysterious ship had made no aggressive moves, continuing its steady approach until the Confederation forces appeared, then stopping completely. "We are receiving a transmission, Admiral," the communications officer announced. "It appears to be audio and visual." "Display it," Zortok ordered. The main screen flickered, and a creature appeared. It had only 2 eyes, pinkish tan skin, and strange fur on the top of its head. It wore some kind of uniform with small symbols Zortok couldn't decipher. "This is Captain Ethan Carter of the United Earthship Defiant. We come in peace and seek to establish diplomatic relations with your civilization." The translation matrix took only seconds to process the simple language, which surprised Zortok. Most first contact scenarios required hours of computational linguistics. "I am Admiral Zortok of the Arlaxian Confederation Defense Force. Identify your species and explain why you have entered our space." The creature, this human, smiled, showing flat white teeth. "We are humans from the planet Earth. Our long-range surveys detected your civilization, and we've come to establish peaceful contact. We're explorers and traders hoping to build friendly relations." Zortok's skin rippled with skepticism. "You came in a single ship? Where is the rest of your fleet?" Captain Carter's expression remained calm. "This is an exploratory mission. The Defiant was sent alone as a gesture of peaceful intentions. The Valkyrie Admiral had lived too long and fought too many wars to believe such a claim. No spacefaring civilization would send a lone vessel into potential enemy territory unless it was a trap, a suicide mission, or something he couldn't yet understand. "You will remain in position while I consult with the Confederation Council," Zortok stated. "Any movement will be considered hostile." "Understood, Admiral. We'll maintain position and remain at your disposal." The transmission ended, and Zortok immediately ordered a full scan of the region. There had to be more ships hiding somewhere, perhaps using technology that masked their presence. 2 hours later, Zortok stood before the 7-member Confederation Council. Each member represented one of the founding species of their alliance, and all appeared equally troubled by the situation. "Our scans have detected no other vessels within 3 light days," Zortok reported. "If they have more ships, they're either using technology far beyond our detection capabilities or they're too far away to provide support." Counselor Shintra, a crystalline being who led the diplomatic corps, chimed with a sound like glass bells. "Perhaps they are telling the truth. Not all species approach first contact with military might. Or perhaps this is some kind of test, a sacrifice to gauge our response," countered Counselor Drev, the insectoid strategist whose species was known for their calculating nature. After much debate, the council authorized Zortok to invite the human captain to a controlled meeting aboard the defense station. Security would be maximum, with contingency plans for every possible scenario. Captain Ethan Carter stepped off the shuttle into the Confederation docking bay, accompanied by 3 crew members. Zortak studied them carefully. Carter was of medium height for his species, with short brown hair and observant green eyes that seemed to be taking in everything. Beside him stood a female human with dark skin and curly black hair. "This is my communications officer, Olivia Martinez," Carter said, gesturing to the woman. "And this is my science officer, Dr. Julia Morgan," he added, indicating another female with auburn hair who carried several devices. "And finally, Lieutenant Daniel Wright, my security officer." The male named Wright was taller than Carter, with a solid build and watchful blue eyes. He carried no visible weapons, which Zortak found both reassuring and suspicious. As they walked through the station toward the council chambers, Zortak noticed how the humans moved with a strange mixture of caution and confidence. They seemed genuinely interested in their surroundings, pointing out features to each other in low voices. "Your station is impressive," Captain Carter commented. "The gravitational regulation is remarkably stable." Zortak's skin flickered with surprise. "You can sense that without instruments?" "We can feel it," Carter explained. "Humans are sensitive to gravitational fluctuations. It's uncomfortable when artificial gravity isn't consistent." This was the first genuinely interesting thing about these humans. Perhaps they had other unusual sensitivities. The council chamber was designed to be intimidating to outsiders. The 7 council members sat on elevated platforms. Their forms illuminated dramatically while visitors stood in a pool of light at the center of the room. Captain Carter showed no sign of being impressed or intimidated. He stood tall, hands clasped behind his back, and addressed the council with clear, simple language. "Honorable members of the Arlaxian Confederation, I bring greetings from Earth and the United Human Systems. We seek to establish peaceful relations, cultural exchange, and potentially trade agreements." Councillor Shintra's crystalline form shimmered. "Captain Carter, we must ask directly, why has your government sent only 1 ship? Is this truly a diplomatic mission or something else?" Carter smiled slightly. "It's a fair question. Earth believes that first contact should be gentle. 1 ship is less threatening than a fleet. We're here to learn about you before committing more resources to this region of space." "And if we had destroyed your ship on sight?" Councillor Drevey clicked his mandibles together sharply. "Then Earth would have learned something important about the Confederation," Carter replied evenly, "and would have responded accordingly." The subtle implication wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Zortak felt his respect for these humans increase slightly. They were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, possibly both. As the meeting continued, Zortak observed how Officer Martinez seemed to be picking up the nuances of their various languages with remarkable speed, and how Dr. Morgan discreetly used her devices to analyze the chamber's atmosphere and materials. The security officer, Wright, remained vigilant without being obvious about it. There was more to these humans than met the eye. 1 ship, 4 crew members present, yet they conducted themselves as if they had the full confidence of their entire civilization behind them. By the end of the formal meeting, the council had granted the humans temporary visitation rights and established a preliminary communication protocol. As Captain Carter and his team prepared to return to their ship, Zortak approached him privately. "Captain, I still don't understand your strategy. In my experience, exploration requires protection." Carter's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Admiral, sometimes the best protection is to appear unprotected. We look forward to showing you how humans explore the universe." As Zortak watched the human shuttle depart, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Confederation had just encountered something entirely new, a species that approached the dangers of space with neither the overwhelming force of conquerors nor the timidity of the truly peaceful, but with something else entirely. Only 1 ship. It made no tactical sense. Yet somehow, watching the shuttle dock with the Defiant, Zortak suspected he would soon understand why the humans had made such an unusual choice. 3 weeks passed since the arrival of the human ship. The Defiant remained in its assigned orbit, accepting visitors from the Confederation and sending small delegations to learn about their hosts. Captain Carter had proven to be a skilled diplomat, showing genuine interest in each of the 7 species that made up the Arlaxian Confederation. Admiral Zortak's suspicion had not disappeared, but it had shifted. The humans seemed genuinely peaceful, yet there was something about them that suggested hidden depths. He noticed how they asked careful questions, how they observed everything, and how they shared information about Earth that seemed open while revealing little of strategic value. On the 23rd day, everything changed. Zortak was summoned to an emergency council meeting. When he arrived, the chamber was already dark with tension. Counselor Drev's exoskeleton had turned the deep red of alarm. The outer colony on Prestus IV has gone silent, Counselor Shintra announced, her crystalline form dimmed with concern. Long-range scans show energy signatures consistent with Voidborn activity. The room grew even quieter. The Voidborn were not spoken of to outsiders. They were the darkness that had haunted the Confederation for generations, a mysterious species that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks behind. How long until they reach the defense perimeter? Zortak asked. 5 days at their current speed, replied the military analyst. Counselor Drev clicked his mandibles nervously. We should inform the humans. Their ship is in the projected path. Debate erupted among the council members. Some argued that the humans should be told to leave immediately with no explanation. Others suggested using the human ship as a distraction while Confederation forces prepared. Zortak listened silently, his skin darkening with each dishonorable suggestion. Finally he spoke. We will tell them the truth. If they are potential allies, they deserve to know the danger. If they are potential enemies, better to see how they react to a greater threat. The council reluctantly agreed, and Captain Carter was summoned. When the human entered the chamber, he immediately sensed the change in atmosphere. Something's happened, he said. Not a question, but a statement. Counselor, Shintra explained about the Voidborn, an ancient enemy that had been attacking outer colonies for decades. A species that seemed to exist only to consume and destroy. They're approaching this sector, she finished. Your ship is in danger. We recommend you return to Earth immediately. Carter listened without interruption, his face becoming more serious with each word. When Shintra finished, he asked a question that surprised them all. How do they attack? What are their tactics? Zortak stepped forward. They use energy-draining weapons that disable our ships, then board and consume everything. Organic matter, technology, even raw materials. Nothing survives. Carter nodded slowly. And your defenses? We fight as best we can, Zortak said, stiffly. We have destroyed individual Voidborn ships, but they always return in greater numbers. The human captain was quiet for a moment, then touched a small device on his wrist. Carter to Defiant, connect me with Chief Engineer Collins. A female voice responded through the device. Collins here, Captain. Sam, I need you to analyze the data we've collected on Confederation defensive systems and look for weaknesses in their shield harmonics. Priority 1. Understood, Captain? Any particular reason? I'll brief you when I return. Carter out. He looked up at the council. I'd like to see your battle records against these Voidborn. All of them. Counselor Drev chittered in surprise. You're not leaving? No, Carter said simply. We're not. Over the next few hours, Captain Carter and Science Officer Morgan reviewed years of battle footage and reports. They asked countless questions about Voidborn biology, behavior patterns, and technological capabilities. Lieutenant Wright joined them later, immediately focusing on the tactical aspects of previous encounters. Admiral Zortak observed this with growing curiosity. Captain, I don't understand. You have one ship. Even our fleets cannot stop the Voidborn. Why stay? Carter looked up from a holographic display showing the destruction of a Confederation colony. Because that's what humans do, Admiral. We help where we can. It's suicide, Zortak stated flatly. Carter smiled slightly. Maybe, but we've faced long odds before. Back aboard the Defiant, Carter gathered his senior staff in the conference room. The mood was serious but not fearful. "The situation is clear," Carter said. "The Confederation is under attack by a predatory species they've been unable to defeat. They've lost dozens of colonies and thousands of ships over the past 50 years. Chief Engineer Samantha Collins, a compact woman with short blonde hair and quick hands, pulled up a display. Their defensive technology is actually quite advanced, but they're using fixed shield frequencies. The Voidborn have adapted to those frequencies." Dr. Morgan nodded in agreement. "More concerning is their approach to the Voidborn biology. They treat them as a conventional enemy, but from the tissue samples they've recovered, I believe the Voidborn function more like a hive mind." "A central consciousness?" asked Carter. "Exactly. They're attacking the drones but ignoring the Queen, so to speak." Lieutenant Wright leaned forward. "Their tactical approach is outdated. They form defensive walls with their ships, making them easy targets for energy drainage. No asymmetric warfare, no guerrilla tactics." Communications Officer Martinez had been unusually quiet. When Carter looked her way, she said, "I've been monitoring their communication protocols. Captain, they're using basic encryption that hasn't been updated in what seems like years. It's as if they've given up on innovation." Carter nodded grimly. "They've been fighting a losing war for so long they've stopped trying to win. They're just trying to survive." He stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "We need to change that." "What are you thinking, Captain?" asked. "Right. I'm thinking we show them something they haven't seen before." Carter turned back to face his crew. "Collins, I want you to modify our shield harmonics to create a modulating pattern the Voidborn won't recognize. Morgan, keep analyzing that biological data. Find me a weakness in their neural structure. Wright, develop a tactical approach that doesn't rely on superior numbers." "And me, Captain?" asked Martinez. "I need you to establish a secure channel back to Earth. Encryption level Omega. We need to send everything we've learned." The senior staff exchanged glances. Encryption level Omega was only used in the most critical situations. "Are we calling for reinforcements, sir?" Wright asked carefully. Carter's expression was unreadable. "Not yet, Lieutenant. First we're going to test a theory." "What theory is that, Captain?" Collins asked. Carter looked at each of them in turn. "That sometimes one ship is enough. If it's the right ship, with the right crew, using the right approach." As his staff set to work, Carter returned to the viewport. In the reflection of the glass, he could see the determined faces of his crew behind him. One ship against a threat that had terrorized an entire confederation of advanced species for decades. The odds were beyond terrible. Yet there was something in Carter's slight smile that suggested he knew something the Voidborn, and perhaps even the Confederation, did not. Admiral Zortak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the unyielding vigilance as 200 Confederation warships formed a defensive line. The Voidborn scout group had been detected approaching the mining colony on Kelsis II. Intelligence suggested it was a relatively small force, perhaps 15 to 20 ships, but even that was enough to overwhelm the colony's defenses. "All ships in position, Admiral," his second-in-command reported. Zortak nodded, his skin a deep blue of focused determination. "Begin evacuation of the colony. Defensive pattern Sigma." As the Confederation fleet spread into formation, a communication came through. "Admiral, the human ship Defiant is requesting permission to join the defensive line." Zortak blinked all 6 eyes in surprise. "Put them through." Captain Carter's image appeared on the main screen. "Admiral, we'd like to observe this encounter from a tactical position. We won't interfere unless absolutely necessary." "Captain, this is not a training exercise," Zortak said, his voice sharp with concern. "The Voidborn will destroy your vessel." "Perhaps," Carter acknowledged, "but we need to see them in action to understand how they fight. Data only tells us so much." Zortak considered refusing, but something in the human's steady gaze made him reconsider. "Very well, but maintain position at the rear of our formation. This is not your fight." "Understood, Admiral. Thank you." As the communication ended, Zortak's second-in-command approached. "Is this wise, sir? The humans know nothing of the Voidborn." "They will learn today," Zortak replied grimly, as we all did. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Carter turned to his bridge crew. "Battle stations. Full defensive. Protocols but weapons on standby only." As the crew moved with practiced efficiency, Lieutenant Wright took his position at tactical. "Sir, are we really just going to watch?" "For now, Lieutenant. I want to see how these Voidborn operate firsthand." Dr. Morgan spoke from her science station. "Captain, I've calibrated our sensors to focus on the Voidborn biological signatures. If they have a neural network, as I suspect, we should be able to detect the communication patterns." "Good work, Doctor. Collins, status on shield modifications?" Chief Engineer Collins's voice came through the comm system. "Ready, Captain. We can modulate our shield harmonics every 3.7 seconds, which should prevent their energy weapons from getting a lock on any specific frequency." "Implement immediately," Carter ordered. "Martinez, maintain open channels with all Confederation ships. I want to hear everything they're saying during the battle." "Already done, sir," the communications officer replied. "Their command channels are surprisingly easy to access." Carter nodded and turned his attention to the main view screen. In the distance, dark shapes were appearing against the starfield. "Here they come." The Voidborn ships were unlike anything in Earth's records. They resembled massive angular insects with protruding spines and pulsing membranous sections. They moved with unsettling coordination, spreading out to engage the Confederation line. "Energy spike," Wright called out. "They're firing some kind of beam weapon." On the screen, 3 Confederation ships suddenly went dark, their systems completely drained of power. The Voidborn vessels moved toward them immediately, latching onto the hulls with metallic appendages. "They're boarding the disabled ships," Martinez reported, her voice tight. "Confederation crews are attempting to repel them, but—" She paused, listening to the frantic communications. "The Voidborn are overwhelming them." Carter watched intently as the battle unfolded. The Confederation ships fought bravely, but their tactics were predictable and rigid. They maintained formation even as it became clear the Voidborn were targeting specific weak points. "They're losing," Wright said quietly, as another group of Confederation ships went dark. Carter nodded. "They are. But not because the Voidborn are stronger." He turned to Dr. Morgan. "What are you seeing in those neural patterns?" Morgan's eyes were fixed on her readings. "Fascinating. There's definitely a coordinated communication happening between all Voidborn ships, but it's not centralized, like I expected. It's more like a shared consciousness. They're all thinking as one entity, which means they all share the same weaknesses," Carter concluded. He touched his comm badge. "Bridge to engineering. Collins, are you seeing what their energy weapons are doing to the Confederation shields?" "Yes, sir," Collins replied. "They're creating a harmonic resonance that amplifies as it hits the shields, causing system-wide power failures. But our modulating shields should prevent that." The battle continued to deteriorate for the Confederation forces. Within 20 minutes, they had lost more than 50 ships, with the remainder falling back into a tighter defensive formation. Admiral Zortak's voice came through the comm system, issuing orders to his captains. His tone was resolute, but the underlying message was clear. They were fighting a losing battle. Carter stood up, his decision made. "Right, charge weapons. Target the lead Voidborn vessel, but don't fire until my command. Collins, divert all non-essential power to the shields and engines. Martinez, open a channel to Admiral Zortak." When the Admiral's face appeared on screen, it showed surprise. "Captain Carter, you should retreat immediately. We cannot hold them much longer." "Admiral, with your permission, we'd like to try something," Carter said calmly. "Try what?" Zortak asked, his skin now pale with stress. "A different approach. Please have your ships pull back to give us maneuvering room." Zortak hesitated only briefly. "Very well. You have nothing to lose that we haven't already lost 100 times before." As the Confederation ships began to withdraw, creating a gap in their formation, Carter turned to his helm officer. "Ensign Ben Foster, take us in. Pattern Omega 6. "Omega 6, sir?" That's... Foster looked surprised. I know what it is, Ensign. Execute. The Defiant surged forward, accelerating directly toward the center of the Voidborn formation. On the bridge of the unyielding Vigilance, Admiral Zortak watched in disbelief. What are they doing? It's suicide. But instead of colliding with the Voidborn ships, the Defiant began a series of maneuvers that defied conventional space tactics. It spun and rolled, changing direction so rapidly that it appeared almost erratic, all while moving closer to the enemy formation. On the Defiant's bridge, Carter's voice remained steady. Morgan, status of the neural pattern? They're reacting, sir. The pattern is showing disturbance, almost like confusion. Right, fire-modulating pulse bursts, pattern Alpha 3. The Defiant's weapons fired, not the continuous beams that the Confederation used, but short, sharp pulses that changed frequency with each burst. The first Voidborn ship hit by this attack shuddered, its movements becoming uncoordinated. It's working, Collins reported from engineering. Their energy signature is fluctuating. Carter nodded. All hands execute attack plan Charlie, now. The Defiant suddenly changed tactics again, diving directly toward the damaged Voidborn vessel. As it passed close by, it fired a concentrated pulse directly into what appeared to be a sensory node. The effect was immediate and shocking. The Voidborn ship convulsed, then went completely still. Two nearby Voidborn vessels broke off their attacks on Confederation ships and moved to surround their damaged companion. They're protecting it, Morgan observed. Fascinating. Carter smiled slightly. They think as one, they feel as one. Right, target the next ship. Same pattern. Over the next 10 minutes, the single human ship executed a series of maneuvers that left the observers on the Confederation fleet stunned. The Defiant was not trying to destroy the Voidborn vessels outright. Instead, it was disrupting their coordination, confusing their shared consciousness with unpredictable movements and constantly changing weapon frequencies. When 3 Voidborn ships had been disabled, the remainder suddenly broke off their attack and retreated at high speed, abandoning their damaged companions. On the bridge of the unyielding Vigilance, silence reigned. Admiral Zortak stared at the viewscreen, his 6 eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible, he whispered. Then louder, get me the human ship. When Captain Carter appeared on screen, his uniform was disheveled and there was a small cut on his forehead. But he was smiling. Admiral, he acknowledged, I believe that concludes today's demonstration. Zortak's skin shifted through a range of colors before settling on a bright violet that no human on the Defiant recognized. It was the Valkyrie color of profound astonishment. How? Was all he could ask. How did one ship do what 200 of ours could not? Carter's smile faded into a more serious expression. With respect, Admiral, we'll explain everything back at your station. But first, I suggest we secure those disabled Voidborn vessels. They contain valuable information. As the Defiant returned to formation, the whispers spread throughout the Confederation fleet. One ship. The humans had sent just one ship, and somehow it had been enough. The Confederation Council chamber was packed. Representatives from all 7 species crowded the room, their attention fixed on the center where Captain Carter stood alone. The formal meeting had quickly transformed into something between an interrogation and a celebration. Explain yourself, Captain, Counselor Drev demanded, his mandibles clicking rapidly. How did one human ship defeat Voidborn vessels that our entire fleet couldn't handle? Carter looked around the room, noting the mixture of suspicion, hope, and curiosity on the alien faces. It wasn't about firepower or advanced technology, he began. It was about understanding the enemy. Admiral Zortak stepped forward. We have fought the Voidborn for generations. We understand them well enough. With respect, Admiral, you understand what they do, but not what they are. Carter gestured to Dr. Morgan, who stood at the edge of the chamber with data tablets. Our science officer analyzed the neural patterns of the Voidborn during the battle. They don't just coordinate their attacks, they share a consciousness. Morgan stepped forward, her manner calm and professional. The Voidborn operate as a single entity spread across multiple vessels. This gives them incredible coordination, but also creates a weakness. They literally cannot conceive of individual action. When faced with unpredictable, seemingly random maneuvers, their shared mind experiences something like confusion. Counselor, Shintra's crystalline form shimmered with interest. This is why your erratic flight patterns were so effective. Exactly. Carter nodded. While your ships maintained rigid, predictable formations, we did the opposite. The Voidborn could not anticipate our movements because there was no pattern to recognize. And your weapons? Zortak asked. They seemed no more powerful than ours, yet they disabled the enemy ships. Chief Engineer Collins stepped forward to answer. Your weapons use fixed frequencies. The Voidborn adapted to those long ago. We modulated our weapon frequencies constantly, never staying on one pattern long enough for them to adapt. Counselor, Drev's compound eyes narrowed. If your tactics are so superior, why did Earth send only one ship to our region? Surely a fleet of vessels using these methods would be even more effective. The question hung in the air. The council chamber went completely silent as everyone awaited Carter's answer. Carter smiled slightly. That's the question you've been asking since we arrived, isn't it? Why only one ship? He looked around the room, meeting the gaze of aliens, from 7 different species. The answer is simple. We needed to understand the Voidborn directly, in combat, before committing more resources. Lieutenant Wright stepped up beside his captain. The Defiant is not just an exploration vessel, it's also a reconnaissance ship. We gather intelligence and develop tactical analyses for Earth's defense forces. So you used us as bait? Counselor Drev clicked angrily. You watched our ships die to gather your intelligence? No, Carter said firmly. We intervened as soon as we understood enough to be effective, and now we're sharing everything we've learned with you. Communications Officer Martinez moved forward, carrying a data crystal. This contains all our analysis of Voidborn communication patterns, vulnerabilities, and tactical recommendations. It's yours. Counselor Shintra accepted the crystal. This is generous. It's what allies do, Carter said simply. Admiral Zortak's skin shifted to a deep purple. Allies? We have no formal alliance with Earth. Not yet, Carter acknowledged, but we face a common enemy, and humans have a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. A murmur spread through the chamber as the Confederation representatives discussed this development among themselves. Counselor Shintra raised a crystalline appendage for silence. Captain Carter, while we appreciate your assistance and this information, there's something you're not telling us. Her voice chimed like bells. Your ship engaged in combat, then immediately sent encrypted transmissions back to Earth. Why? Carter exchanged glances with his crew before answering. You're right, there is more. He straightened his shoulders. The Defiant has been sending regular reports back to Earth since we arrived in your space. After the battle, we sent complete, tactical data on the Voidborn. For what purpose? Zortak demanded. To prepare our fleet. The words fell like stones in the silent chamber. Your fleet? Counselor Drev repeated. Carter nodded. Yes. Earth has assembled a battle group at the edge of your space awaiting our final analysis. They're prepared to assist against the Voidborn main force that your intelligence says is approaching your core worlds. Confusion and hope battled across the faces of the council members. Admiral Zortak was the first to recover. How many ships? He asked directly. 150 initially, Carter replied. More will follow if needed. 150? Zortak repeated incredulously. The Voidborn main fleet numbers over 500 vessels, even with your tactics. Numbers aren't everything, Admiral, Lieutenant Wright interrupted. Quality over quantity. Each of our ships will use the tactics you saw today, but with refinements based on what we learned in battle. Dr. Morgan added, we've also developed a more comprehensive understanding of Voidborn biology from the captured vessels. Our ships are being equipped with specialized weapons designed to disrupt their neural network more effectively. Counselor Shintra's crystalline form pulsed with an inner light. This is why you sent one ship first. Not just for reconnaissance, but as a test. A proof of concept, Carter agreed. We needed to confirm our theories before committing the fleet. But why not tell us this from the beginning? Counselor Drev demanded. Why the secrecy? Carter's expression grew more serious. Counselor, when we first arrived, we knew nothing about you except that you controlled this region of space. For all we knew, you might have been allied with the Voidborn, or worse. We needed to assess the situation directly. So the Defiant was both a diplomatic mission and a military scout, Zortak concluded, his skin shifting to a thoughtful blue. Clever. It's how humans operate, Carter explained. We explore, we learn, we adapt. Then we commit our resources, where they'll be most effective. One of the other council members, a gas-based entity contained in a complex environmental suit, floated forward. Captain Carter, your tactics and technology are impressive, but can 150 ships truly make a difference against the Voidborn main fleet? We have fought them with thousands of vessels over the decades and still lost ground. Carter looked at the alien counselor steadily. The number of ships is less important than how they're used. Your fleet fights as individual vessels following rigid protocols. Ours will operate as a coordinated force using adaptive tactics. More importantly, we're not just trying to destroy Voidborn ships, we're targeting their shared consciousness. And if that fails? Zortak asked quietly. Then we adapt again, Carter said firmly. Humans don't give up easily, Admiral. It's not in our nature. The Council called for a brief recess to discuss this new information privately. As the representatives filed out, Admiral Zortak approached Carter and his crew. I still don't fully understand, the Admiral admitted. If your people knew about the Voidborn threat, why risk a single ship? Why not send your fleet immediately? Captain, Carter smiled slightly. Because that's not how humans wage war, Admiral. We don't commit blindly. We observe, we analyze, we understand. Then we strike precisely where it will do the most good. Zortak's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. Your species thinks differently than any I've encountered. We've had plenty of practice, Carter replied. Humans spent most of our history fighting each other. We learned the hard way that the biggest army doesn't always win. As the Confederation Council returned to continue the discussion, Admiral Zortak found himself wondering what kind of species could turn millennia of internal conflict into an advantage. Perhaps, he thought, that was why the humans had sent just one ship. Perhaps one was all they needed to change everything. The Confederation Defense Station trembled as another wave of Voidborn ships attacked the outer perimeter. Admiral Zortak stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the massive battle unfolding across the star system. The Voidborn main fleet had arrived sooner than expected. Over 500 vessels moving as one terrible force toward the Confederation core worlds. Status report, Zortak demanded, his skin a dark blue of focused tension. Our outer defense line is holding at 60% effectiveness, his second-in-command replied. The tactics we learned from the humans have helped, but there are too many enemy ships. We cannot maintain position for more than another 2 hours. Zortak nodded grimly. 3 days had passed since Captain Carter revealed the existence of the human fleet. In that time, the Confederation had frantically reorganized their forces, implementing as many of the human recommendations as possible. Ships were using irregular formations, modulating their shield frequencies, and employing unpredictable maneuvers. It had made a difference, but not enough. Any word from the human ships? Zortak asked, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. Nothing since Captain Carter departed to rendezvous with their fleet. Counselor Shintra's crystalline form shimmered into the command center. Admiral, the Council is requesting an update. The evacuation of the civilian populations cannot be completed in time if the outer defenses fall. Before Zortak could respond, a communication officer called out, Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission from the Defiant. Put it through immediately, Zortak ordered. Captain Carter's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but determined. Admiral, what's your situation? Deteriorating rapidly, Zortak answered honestly. The Voidborn have adapted to our implementation of your tactics. We're losing ships faster than predicted. Carter nodded. As expected, they're a learning enemy. That's why we needed to hold back our main approach. He looked off-screen briefly, speaking to someone outside the transmission field. "Admiral, I need you to pull your forces back to these coordinates." A set of numbers appeared on the screen. "Pull back?" Zortak's skin flashed yellow with alarm. "Those coordinates are perilously close to our core worlds. If we retreat that far, we'll have no defensive depth." "Trust me, Admiral," Carter said, his voice steady. "We've analyzed the Voidborn attack patterns. They're not just attacking your ships. They're hunting something specific." "What do you mean?" "The Voidborn aren't just predators. They're scavengers, with a purpose. They're looking for particular elements and compounds. Your core worlds have rich deposits of the exact materials they seek." Zortak felt a chill. This matched their observations over decades of attacks, but they had never understood the pattern. "How did you determine this?" "We had an advantage," Carter explained. "Fresh eyes. Sometimes an outsider sees patterns that those too close to the problem miss." He leaned forward. "Admiral, I need you to trust me. Pull your fleet back to those coordinates and prepare for our arrival." After a moment's hesitation, Zortak nodded. "Very well, Captain, but my trust has limits, as does our time." As the transmission ended, Zortak issued the retreat orders. Across the star system, Confederation ships disengaged from combat and began falling back toward the coordinates Carter had specified. The Voidborn pursued, seemingly eager to press their advantage. In the command center, tension mounted as the defensive perimeter contracted. The holographic displays showed the Voidborn, fleet spreading out, preparing to overwhelm the final line of defense. "The enemy will be in range of our core worlds in 20 minutes, the tactical officer reported. Still no sign of the human fleet. Counselor Shintra approached Zortak privately. "Admiral, if the humans have abandoned us..." "They haven't," Zortak said with surprising certainty. "I've seen how Carter operates. He has a plan." Suddenly, the sensor officer called out, "Multiple signals appearing at the edge of the system. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database." The main screen shifted to show the arrival point. Space itself seemed to ripple and distort as ships began emerging from what looked like tears in the fabric of reality. They did not appear, all at once or in a neat formation, but in seemingly random locations and intervals around the outer edge of the battlefield. "Those aren't standard jump points," the science officer noted with awe. "They're creating localized space-time disruptions for transit." As the ships fully materialized, Zortak could see they were unlike the Defiant. Where Carter's ship had been sleek and streamlined, these vessels were angular and predatory, their hulls covered with weapon emplacements and unusual sensor arrays. There were vessels of different sizes and configurations, from small agile fighters to massive capital ships. 150 vessels as promised, Zortak murmured. "But what are they doing? They're too spread out to form an effective defensive line." The answer came moments later as the human ships began to move. Instead of coming together to confront the Voidborn fleet directly, they maintained their scattered positions and started emitting unusual energy patterns. The emissions pulsed in a complex, coordinated sequence that rippled across the battlefield. On the tactical display, the Voidborn fleet's perfect coordination suddenly faltered. Ships that had been moving in precise formation began to drift apart, their movements becoming erratic. "What's happening?" Counselor Shintra asked. Before anyone could answer, Captain Carter's voice came through the communication system. "Admiral Zortak, the disruption has begun. The signal we're broadcasting is interfering with the Voidborn neural network. Phase 1 is complete." "Phase 1? Zortak repeated. "Yes, Admiral. Now for Phase 2. Carter's voice held an edge of satisfaction. "All human vessels, execute attack pattern Epsilon. Target the command nodes." The scattered human ships suddenly accelerated, each one moving toward a specific Voidborn vessel. The Confederation observers watched in amazement as the human ships ignored the vast majority of the enemy fleet, focusing instead on just 23 specific targets. "They've identified the control ships," the tactical officer realized. "Somehow, they've found the centers of the hive mind." The battle that followed defied conventional tactics. The human ships moved with dizzying unpredictability. their weapons firing in patterns that seemed random, but were precisely calculated to disrupt the void-born neural connections. The Confederation vessels, following Carter's instructions, used their more traditional firepower to protect the human ships from counterattacks. Within 30 minutes, the impossible happened. The void-born fleet, which had moved with perfect unity since first contact, began to fragment. Ships drifted aimlessly, or fired at random targets, sometimes even at other void-born vessels. Their shared consciousness is collapsing, the science officer reported with disbelief. They cannot coordinate without it. Admiral Zortok watched as the once invincible enemy that had terrorized the Confederation for generations disintegrated into chaos. Scattered across the battlefield, human ships methodically targeted and disabled the confused void-born vessels. The Defiant took up position alongside Zortok's command ship. Captain Carter's face appeared on screen once more. "Admiral, have your forces move in and secure the disabled vessels. Our fleet will continue to broadcast the disruption signal to prevent them from reconnecting." "Captain," Zortok said, his voice thick with emotion, his skin shifting to a bright violet of wonder. "You've done the impossible." Carter smiled slightly. "Not impossible, Admiral. Just unlikely. Sometimes that's all you need, to try the approach no one expects." As the Confederation ships moved to mop up the remains of the void-born fleet, Counselor Shintra approached the view screen. "Captain Carter, the Confederation owes you a debt we cannot repay. When you first arrived, we asked why humans would send just one ship. Now I understand." Carter nodded. "One ship to learn. One ship to understand. One ship to show what's possible." He looked out at the scattered human fleet working in perfect coordination despite their appearance of chaos. "That's how humanity has always operated, Counselor. We explore, we learn, and then we change the rules." As the last of the void-born ships were secured or destroyed, Admiral Zortok realized that the galaxy had changed forever. The humans, with their strange approach to warfare and exploration, had accomplished in days what the Confederation had failed to do in generations. And it had begun with just one ship.